back here on the show, and I've got a different co-host all of a sudden. Lalo's joining me here on the show because we're going to have a really fascinating discussion here with Angela O'Hara all about Amazonian plant medicine and more, right, Angela?
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
So let's just get a little bit of a background about you, because you are a PhD candidate at York University, and that's somehow related to what we're talking about. And when I say plant medicine, I do mean also including ayahuasca, which is a lot of people are very interested in these days. So can you give us a little bit of a background to what you're all about?
Sure, absolutely. My PhD is, I am obtaining it through the communication department, or the program of communication and culture, which is actually a joint program through Ryerson and York universities.
Okay.
And for way too long, and I'm willing to admit, I have been researching shamanism and indigenous knowledge, particularly from the point of view in the context of Amazonian mestizo cosmology and indigenous practices relating to that, specifically of the upper Amazon in Peru.
Mm-hmm.
Right, so this is the area where I have been traveling every year to really understand how people relate to basically how they relate to the earth, how they obtain knowledge from the earth, how they heal through this kind of knowledge that they have obtained through the earth, which is radically different than how we relate to knowledge.
And you said mestizo when you described that. How is that a little bit different than the traditional knowledge in Peru?
Well, it's quite different in that mestizo is not necessarily completely indigenous. Mestizo is a combination of indigenous and urban, right? So basically what it means is that a person they have mixed, an indigenous person who has experienced Western or influence from the city, right, and has mixed and has created a kind of syncretic cosmology based on ideas taken from both areas, right? So they're kind of a bridge between urban life and life, amongst more traditional culture, in a way. Does that make sense?
Kind of like Métis
or
the voodoo
it is similar.
Culture, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's definitely a syncretic belief system.
All right. Now, how did so you've been interested in this, studying this for a long time. I mean, what was it that piqued your interest initially?
Particularly in Peru, or particularly in
of the plant medicine of this particular course of study that you've been on for a long time?
Well, I've always been interested in plants, and I've always been interested in shamanism. And I think, going back to when I was a child, I always felt I understood things and I knew things in a certain way that I could never have validated by my experience with others. Mm-hmm. So in many ways I grew up searching for a different way to know things and a different way to have my experience validated, if you know what I mean, right? So there's a sense of feeling uncertain in myself and the need to search for an alternative way to access knowledge. Mm-hmm. Does this make sense?
Yeah, it kind of makes sense. And it kind of reminds me, because it seems to me that there may be almost an irreconcilable argument, if you will, between sort of a certain kind of biblical, say, Christianity and the idea of plant medicine, or the idea of even consulting or conversing with spirits from the spirit world that are brought to us from using things like ayahuasca and some of the other plant medicines. And I wonder if you can just sort of talk to us a little bit about that, for people that are coming at this, from a sort of a certain kind of Christian background, that say, consulting with these spirits is just the wrong thing to do.
Mm-hmm. Well, I wouldn't like to say that that is what vegetalismo is about, and that is what working with ayahuasca is about.
Sure.
Right?
Okay.
One of the main tenets of vegetalismo is basically healing comes from aligning yourself with the rhythms of nature. Right? So that's why, you know, going to the forest, being amongst trees, spending enough time to allow your body to detox from all of the pollution and toxins and noise that we live with every day in the city is vitally important, because we actually have become estranged from that, our natural rhythms of our body, our connection to the movements of nature, like the movements of the moon, our connectedness to the plants. I really believe we have this feedback system where we're constantly in communication with plants and trees and animals at a level that we're not conscious of that we
You were
perhaps
saying
sense,
earlier
but
that
don't
we
understand
share
the
like
reason.
90% of our DNA, and that with plants, right?
I wouldn't want
And
to say an
that's-
actual number on that,
Yeah.
but,
Yeah.
but it only makes sense because we're all from the earth. How can it be that we would not have an affinity? That we would not, you know, our body is composed of the very same thing that the earth is composed. Right?
Okay, so then if so let's talk about then if my kind of take on what ayahuasca or plant medicines was about. Can you just describe just in general then, what is it about? Like, what is, you know, what does that, you know, how do we approach that? How do we approach plant medicine? What is plant medicine? What is it
Sure,
doing?
absolutely.
What can it do for us?
Absolutely. Well, in the recent, I would say 10 to 15 years, there's been a huge movement of people coming from the West, from North America, from Europe, from all parts of the world, to places like Peru and Ecuador and Colombia, who have become very disillusioned with Western allopathic medicine. And they are actually needing to take more power in their own healing. And this has brought them to working with plant medicines, and also to participate in the revival of shamanism, which has also occurred in the last, very much so in the last 10 years as well. So what I like to call archetypal shamanism, which is shamanic practices which take elements from many different shamanic communities around the world.
And you're involved in that as well.
Yes, as
So
well, that's right. So I'm a shamanic coach as well, and I obtained my training from here in Toronto, at the
Amazing.
Institute of Shamanic Studies.
Amazing.
But so exactly the way vegetalismo works is, first of all, it's an animistic belief system. So an animistic belief system means that there is the belief that we are interconnected with all things on the planet, and that everything has its own energy and its own being, that they are entities. And in vegetalismo, they would say its own genio, or genius, right? And that we can learn from nature, and we can
so
receive
we're getting
that
to know
knowledge.
the plants, and we're becoming familiar with the plant itself, not just with the medicine that we use to cure ourselves. And in this way, how would you describe that? How would you describe the difference between using a power plant and the relationship that happens between you and the power plant and just a traditional medicine?
Well, the way that it's seen in vegetalismo specifically is that the plants, as I mentioned, they possess a spirit, right, and a will, right? So they have something which is called the shamanic dieta. And the shamanic dieta is basically where you purify your body. First of all, you go on a very strict and specific diet and remove a lot of the toxins and a lot of the lower vibrational things from our diet, so alcohol, salt, pork, other things like that. And you undergo a period of cleansing. And then what they traditionally do is they go into the jungle and they spend a lot of time in the jungle, and then they ingest a tea or a preparation, an infusion from the actual plant, and they go and sit with the plant and they stay there for varying lengths of time until they've received the knowledge of that plant. So they believe that you have to actually go and live in the jungle to receive that knowledge. So shamans have worked for...
Tell us at all about have you had experiences with the ayahuasca then? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, the ayahuasca is really interesting because it's a very powerful detoxifier. So part of the way, not just vegetalismo works in terms of the medicine, because there are many other indigenous communities in South America that also work with ayahuasca. they have used it for the purpose of detoxification. Right? So they believe that healing comes from detoxification. Right?
Which is totally consistent with what Adam was saying earlier.
Yeah.
That
But
was
on an energetic level,
Mm-hmm.
as well as on a physical and a spiritual level.
And what is that? Okay, so what does detoxification mean on an energetic level?
Well, going back towards spirits,
Yeah.
from their cosmology, they believe that there is an occult realm that you can encounter while you're taking ayahuasca, and ayahuasca can open the portals to this realm, and those beings and those entities and energies can become visible, that otherwise you would not have seen them. But that what happens that is that these entities, which also possess a will, can infect you. Right? And that illness comes from being infected by a bad energy or a bad entity.
I agree with that. Like, I think that there's like physical causes for illness, so that you get a virus, you get a cold. I also think that if you're surrounded by negative energy, or if you want to use an iconography that, you know, puts it out in spirit realm deities or whatever, I think that energy can really embody. I think that it can materialize. And I think that the reason I say that is because I have experienced that. Now, the active ingredient in the ayahuasca and these other things is DMT. And so I've taken something called Yopo, and it has the same effect. And when all of this stuff, or the shaman who did that before all this stuff came up out of me, I asked him, I said, well, what is it? You know, like we're saying, what is it that's coming out? And he said, you'll know what it is. And I could feel that as it was coming out, it was kind of like this stuff, and I was taking it out, and I could feel that it was accumulated energy toxins, really, that had manifested in my body.
And probably when you looked at it afterwards, it didn't look like anything, right?
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
It
right.
just looked like clear stuff.
Absolutely. So according to this cosmology, they believe that material has energy and has sentience, right? And that energy, if it's powerful enough, can become an entity,
Yeah.
right? And it can attach itself to you,
Yeah.
right? And make you very sick or addicted, right?
Or just not happy, or
Absolutely
dysfunctional,
melancholic or
right?
depressed, or
Yeah.
it sucks your life force, basically.
Yeah.
So one of the aspects of ayahuasca that works so well is that it raises your vibration very high till almost so you can eject these energies and these entities that cling to you.
So would you say that people might get like emotionally, like you're saying, talking about, well, or happy? So let's say, now this is a healing process that you're talking about. So somebody comes into this, but they're not sick. So what would happen? Would somebody go ahead and do that, and then when they come out of that, they are free of things they didn't realize that they were dealing with, that they were coping with, that were mental things or emotional things, or, you know, like you're saying. So this is a way for us to process negative effects on ourselves that we might not even know that we're dealing with.
Absolutely. I mean, it's because we have, as a culture, become so alienated from our own experience in many ways, like our sense of intuition, our sixth sense, as it were, that something is wrong with us. You know, we may not be aware that we have this energy that's attached to us. Even though if we were very perceptive, we might feel it, and we might realize there's something extraneous to my being that's holding me back in my life, right? That's holding, you know, something that's manifesting over and over again that I can't break free of.
And isn't that how you want to help people? Really? Is that, you know, because I think that that's interesting to me, because you see people going along, they seem to be happy, it seems like everything is right, but it really isn't, and they haven't really broken through to actualizing their potential. So that kind of brings me to wanting to talk about your research center. Yeah, so can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. Last year, I finally bought this piece of land that used to be owned by a shaman that I work with about 40 kilometers outside of Pucallpa, which is an upper Amazonian city. and I want to build there, or it's in process, early stages in process of building a center for visionary art and culture.
Do you have high speed?
Internet is on its way.
They'll just mind travel. They'll bilocate and they'll mind travel. Because go ahead.
Well, no, you go.
I was just going to say that means that there'll be some place that people can go to get introduced, and also in this way that is the indigenous ways, and then a way for us who are coming from an urban environment to access that.
Absolutely.
Right. And so what kind of things are you expecting? What is your vision of that research center, and what does that look like?
Well, for me, I suppose what has been very fascinating in my particular journey with Amazonian medicines is how there are many other plants other than the ayahuasca brew, for example, right? And there's literally thousands of different healing plants in the Amazon, and each of them has a teaching. And if you diet with these plants long enough, they will reveal astounding things to you, and they'll work on your consciousness gradually but surely over years until you're completely changed, right? So there are different plants which are wonderful for dreams and visions. I've been, for example, taking a plant called ahosacha. Ahosacha means jungle garlic, but it's not actually related to the garlic. But it's used a lot in baños florecimientos, which are like healing baths, cleansing baths that purify the energy before you go into an ayahuasca ceremony, right? It's been used traditionally by indigenous people to clean their weapons, to get rid of bad energy, right? And it's a hunting skill, basically, or what you'd call stalking plant, but not actually like stalking, looking in people's windows. Stalking meaning your ability to obtain the thing you want in life, right? So I've been just drinking this tea every night for about 3 months here, right? And over time, it has given me a lot of power and a lot of energy and a lot of clarity, as well as some pretty incredible dreams.
Well, that's what I want to talk to you about too, is, we're talking about all these outside systems, our government, and all these things that are not empowering us. And how does the plant medicines and the work that you do help people navigate their way through that?
That's a really important question, because the whole point of working with plant medicines is, first of all, you have to realize that those plants have knowledge, and those plants have a teaching. And however you ingest it into your cells makes it an extremely personal learning experience, right? So basically it's strengthening you from a core level, these plants, and it's giving you information that's yours and yours alone. So you are developing a very personal, intimate relationship with that knowledge.
And it also releases you, because, doesn't it? Because we were talking earlier, or we were just talking about ego itself. But the ego is the description. It's how you describe yourself. It's the construct. It's the ways people have been describing you all your life. It's all the things that you did over and over again that people told you were good at. So on that level, the power medicines will remove that temporarily. Is that correct?
Well, what will happen with some of these medicines is that basically all the stories that you're talking about that you've created, that you've been living through, that other people have co-created with you, tend to get sloughed off, right? Like a snake, with all the other toxins. And for example, if you take ayahuasca, you may find the first things that you start to purge, because it's also called la purga, which is because you purge a lot of things, are all your media toxins. Right? So you'll have suddenly a regurgitation of all the media, all the movies that affected you and traumatized you when you were a child, all the advertising, all the stuff that you had been ingesting at a psychic level will suddenly come out.
Yeah.
So it's really, really interesting, including all of those stories. And what you're left with is your soul connection with the earth, which in the end is all you really need.
And is this why you're going to take people to the Amazon to do this because of also what you talked about earlier, the environment of the nature and our own ability to resonate. I mean, resonation is when one thing vibrates and then another thing responds and they start to do the same thing. So you want to put yourself in the vibration after you've done this ayahuasca to continue, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, it's incredible healing going to the jungle itself. I mean, these immense medicine trees, the vibration of those trees, of that land is incredible. Just to be there is so healing. Never mind working with the medicine itself, right? So,
Wow.
I mean, I think healing starts first with getting out there, giving yourself the space and time to detoxify
Yeah.
and find out who you really are.
I would
Right?
agree.
And then you can ground yourself in the most fundamental and primordial way possible, right? And that's where you find out who you are, and that your vision of life alone is enough,
Right.
right?
But is it? When we take it back to the city, or back to our, where we live after that experience. I mean, I've had some experiences, say with plant medicines, right? Where, but then, the effects wore off, and even though at the time you sense that you could really grasp that truth, that profound truth and connection, but you get back to reality, back to your city life, and it just evaporates kind of.
Absolutely. That's why the detoxification model is so important when you're thinking about working with plant medicines, right? Because you're detoxifying at an energetic level, at a physical level, at a spiritual level, right? But if you are dipping yourself back into the toxic pool,
Which is what we will be
with
doing.
what you do,
right?
then of course you're just going back.
Well,
to
I
where
wanted
you
to ask a question. Are you wearing some traditional jewelry
Yes,
there?
yes.
Okay. Because for me, it's like it's the symbology and the art that goes along with those medicines that I think will bring you back, and bring you back to that moment. And I think that when we do some practices and we set out smudge or things that are associated to those ceremonies, then we can cue ourselves back into that. But we have to put effort into it. So if you just go and have a beautiful journey with Angela and then you come back to the city, you would want to have, I think, some references to that feeling.
Sure.
And but what you said is you have to have the time alone and on
That's
your own
what's
to
ideal,
bring yourself
for
back.
sure. And I do think there is a trend in our culture that's very important to address, and that we think that we can take a little magic bullet and everything is going to be fine. But actually working with the medicine requires work and intention, an intention to heal, right?
Yeah. And that's the second time in today's show that term magic bullet has come up in that same context.
Absolutely.
But I want to ask you another question kind of related to what you were just saying. Going back to what you said earlier, and that there is a trend of this shamanic culture coming back, right? And I want to, and this goes back to my original question here too today. So what happened that caused us to get away in the first place from shamanic culture? And then what were the, and now what is causing us to go back to that? And are we going to benefit, or is that?
That's a big question.
Yeah.
That's a big,
30 seconds.
big question.
Yeah, we have 30
goodness.
seconds for you to answer
but
that.
Can you? Yeah.
I don't know, empire, colonialism, so many things.
Yeah.
How we define and understand knowledge, for example, which is why it interests me so much, that area. I mean, we don't even question what knowledge is in our culture. We just believe it's something that's outside of ourselves that has to be obtained.
And I would say
Right?
it's also just that some people came along, and because of these powerful experiences, they wanted it for themselves and they wanted to parcel it out. They just simply wanted to keep this magic from us. And they made secret ceremonies, and it's only, you have to do this and this. And I think it.
Okay, then I got one more question. And that is, because you mentioned that, as we were talking before we actually came on, that taking a journey like an ayahuasca journey can be a dangerous thing if it's not. If say you do it on your own,
Absolutely.
or you're not prepared.
This
or
is
you're
so
in
important to address, and I ask everyone to pay attention to this if they're to leave with something. This is it. I mean, there's many people who are working with ayahuasca. There's many people who are working with other plant teachers and other chemically crafted teachers, psychedelics, and so on. It's very important to take power back in your healing. Number one, that's a wonderful thing, and I highly advocate that. However, there's a reason why there are shamans. When you work with these plant medicines, whether you choose to believe it or not, you open yourself up to a lot of energies that you may not be prepared to deal with, right? And a lot of people, it has ruined them because they decided that they were going to experiment with these medicines without really understanding what they were dealing with. These are very powerful, sentient medicines, right?
But if they're beneficial,
they need the correct context, to work with them. Very, very important. I know, we believe that we should just be able to go out and buy something and ingest it, and then it's going to work its magic on us.
Yeah.
But
doesn't
here
work
again,
that
okay,
way.
so now this is getting a little
Yeah.
esoteric, but if we have to, because we talk about that idea of the colonialism, in a sense, giving your power away to another, right? But here we are, now you're saying, we have to give some power to a shaman to help us through this kind of experience rather than
Well,
being
it's
completely responsible ourselves.
absolutely. And as I say, I'm fully an advocate of people taking the power back. However, this is a medicine that's been around thousands of years. As I said, it's extremely powerful. You need someone who has had the experience and has learned the respect for the medicine. We do not have the respect yet. We have not earned either the respect of the medicine as well,
And it's
to be
also
able
just
to use it
knowledge.
freely,
And it's
to have the
knowledge, too.
knowledge.
And
right?
maybe that's
Yeah.
part of the, or the idea of reverence, right? Reverence for, for the universe itself. Because we're walking around in the West very irreverent about everything,
Absolutely.
right?
Absolutely.
And we approach these plant medicines with the same irreverence, right?
And with plants in general.
Yeah.
Like, we have lost our ability to listen. We've lost our ability to communicate with our world. It's kind of madness living in this little bubble that we've created for ourselves.
I'm just gonna. I was always doing something, but I think I was watching that Kymatica film over the last couple of days or something like that. And in that film, he's saying, maybe addressing that question I said, is that he was saying, like a shaman or like an Aboriginal culture, approaching the whole experience of reality as their Bible or our Bible, that we can read from reality itself the signs and the communication of God or whatever, right?
Absolutely. And I think we're coming out of a history of at least 2,000 years of anthropocentrism, which is position the human as the center of everything, right? And is basically discredited and all other life forms on the planet as having any value except for us to go and extract something from it, right? So in many ways we have to totally reposition our consciousness with regards to our environment and see our world and our reality as a collaborative thing. It's not just about us and them creating something of a material. It's us collaborating with everything else, right? If that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, we're not going to answer all the questions today, and we could probably stay here and have this conversation for hours and hours. But yeah.
One last thing I want to ask about is I want to ask how you really specifically want to help people at the center, because you had talked about pushing people through creative blocks as well, and then and then you can tell us how we can get in touch with you and so on.
Absolutely. Well, it's multimodal, so I'll be drawing on a lot of resources from my experience as a shamanic coach as well, and also from my experience dieting and as an apprentice with plant medicines as well. So the program will be it'll be a shamanic program, right, which will draw on plant medicines and different kinds of visionary techniques, from guided shamanic journeys to various different kinds of exercises that I have built up over my own research and over time.
Excellent.
Yeah.
And so when does this start? When can we come down and begin our journey?
Well, hopefully next year.
Okay.
Hopefully, yes.
All right. But in the meantime, are you helping people who want to...
I'm facilitating people going down to this healing center. It's called Santuario Healing. Yeah.
All right. And is there a website or anything where people can check
it's
out?
www.santuariohealing.com.
Can
How
you
do-
spell that
Yeah,
out for us?
Santuario
Definitely.
is like Spanish for sanctuary. So
Okay.
SANTUARIO and then healing.com.
Great.
Yeah.
So no C and Sank, is it?
It's Spanish. SantuarioHealing.com. Yeah. And it's a family-run center by a vejalista called Maestro Santiago Enrique Melendez. And he has 30 years experience working with plant medicines. And if anyone's interested in it, like a sincerely authentic experience working with ayahuasca and other plant medicines, definitely they should go.
Excellent.
Okay.
Wonderful.
That's great.
Well, yeah, it was amazing having you on the show.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, very nice to be involved in this. So best of luck with the center and all of the work
Thank
that you
you.
do.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right.
Thanks.
Now, we're going to just take a little break and we're going to come back. And who do we have coming on next?
We've got
Pretty
some,
Boy.
Yeah, we've got some entertainment and some music coming right up.
Pretty Boy Swift,
Yeah.
Sean
after the break.
Spencer, Jay Cummings.